Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode of Connect the Dots. I'm Arya, and I am thrilled to have an incredible guest and a new friend, Reema Rachel, with me today. Reema is joining me as we explore in Leo season the reclamation of what is lost or hidden. And this means this is an entire spectrum of things. It isn't just one thing. It isn't just one time that we go and do this. And so if you are new to Connect the Dots, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And a big welcome to Reema. So Reema is this incredible human. She's also the founder of something called the Hira Collective. I've had the great benefit of talking to Reema a little bit over the last few months, and I understand her as someone who has a strong background in education, in schooling, as well. I think I read somewhere that you were described as a wellness tech visionary.
Hmm.
So the Hira Collective is a platform that offers a vetted community of healers and practitioners that are not only vetted for their level of the quality and integrity of their service, but also their ethics and cultural rootedness, which I really appreciate because that is needed in this world. So Reema, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction.
My pleasure. It was very easy. I'm going to put the website of the Hero Collective below. And one of the things that I'm hoping you guys will see is its tagline. I think it says
Mhm.
like honoring roots and nurturing growth.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, Reema, I know that there is a personal story that birthed the Hira Collective. So, could you share that with us? Specifically, I want to know, what did you see in the world that led you to birthing Hira, which is it is a tech platform, but it's for the wellness industry.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. I think often our story also just makes more sense backwards, right? And so I think also too, it's not this one pinnacle moment that was like, oh, this is what we need to create. And it continues to be, right? Revamped, it continues to iterate, it continues to change based on experiences, based on conversations, based on meeting beautiful humans like yourselves, right? And so, throughout I'm actually Sindhi, and so the part of India that I'm from, Sindh, no longer actually belongs to India. It belongs to Pakistan after the partition had taken place. So we understand that our ancestry, our roots, our DNA, quite literally can go back, and we carry experiences, traumas in our bones. And growing up, I always felt like, where do I belong? That was always like the question, right? And knowing the history of Sindh as I grew up, that that land is not home anymore because my family didn't convert, and yet there was no judgment or hate in my family against any population. It was just an understanding of humans divide other humans sometimes. But growing up, I always was tethered to the practices, the wellness practices, of my family. My grandmother and her brother, I was very, very close to. So my grandmother moved to Canada when she was 60. Her husband had passed away when my mom was very young, when she was 12 or 13, so I never met her. But my grandma, even after she moved to Canada, continued to remain really close to her brother, who would travel from America to Dubai and India. And they would connect at least once a week. And then as technology advanced, they would do FaceTime and as well as letters and all that. And he would come visit for months at a time, and she would go visit. So they were very, very close. And him and I would actually have a weekly date, Sundays at 10 a.m., which was 7 p.m. for him in Dubai, where we would do yoga or mudras or tapping, or he would talk to me about different things and like different plant medicines and like have mint in the water and all these things. And I remember, growing up and questioning, well, when I'd go to a yoga class or whatever, and it was different than what I had experienced or learned about. And so it was this really interesting separation of who I was being. And it was this version of me who was outside the home and this version of me who was inside the home. And it was really, as I've traveled through the world and I continue to, it's how do we bring those two versions and come to peace with actually both of those versions, and or needing to no longer you know code switch or need to participate in these commercialized ways of healing. And so it was very conflicting for me when I would go to a yoga class and people were saying namaste at the end. And I'm like, that means hello. Why are we saying that now? Or we would do poses and not really understand the purpose behind them. Or, there wasn't really this intentionality of being in our body, but really just moving our body. And there's a difference there, right? And so, yeah, and I also experienced a great deal of harm, as I would seek out practitioners because I genuinely believed and continue to practice in spirituality and working with energy. I experienced a great deal of harm or witnessed harm of shaming or predatory practices. And so the idea of Hira just kind of evolved from all the versions of me that needed Hira, all the versions of me that needed Hira to seek practitioners or healing practices or modalities that were rooted in ethical practices, that were rooted in the ancestral practices that they had evolved from. And so here is really for me. It's all for all the version of me that was 5, 6, 7, the version of me that was 12 and didn't love her hair, and the version of me that wanted to no longer be brown, the version of me who didn't completely appreciate all the versions, all my own roots, and didn't understand my own roots. And so yeah, that Hira is for all the versions of me, and presumably all the versions of people out there who are looking to reconnect with themselves and reconnect, and doing that with community, right? I think that's really important, and not just a buzzword, but knowing that we're not in this individualistic journey, but we are responsible for ourselves and our contribution to the collective.
Wow, you've said so much in there. So I'm going to try and like pull out a couple of
Absolutely.
things for the next few questions. And thank you so much for sharing that. And it is really incredible when the thing that has caused us pain becomes our gift back
Mhm.
to the world, which, even in speaking to you a few times, and I've gotten to do that in the last month or so, that is so much of a lot of that essence of you really comes through now that you've launched Hira. It's what, 12, 14 weeks old now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so firstly, I honor this journey that it has been, and congrats on your 14-week-old tech baby.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So one of the things, and you actually touched on this so well, many people feel attracted to or resonance with or simply feel belonged to cultures that are not their biological lineage. And like yoga means a million different things to millions of different people who are not from from India. Like it is a shared world lineage. And I've often thought that people who are from a certain culture, they are the stewards of that culture. We get to enjoy it, but there's no ownership around it. And yet the other side is that, as you said, um, there is a sense of um, appropriation, a cultural appropriation, for lack of better words. So on Hira as a platform and as someone who is really leading a different way of vetting and weaving together a community, could I get your sense on how you truly see that? And what, like, is there a way to be of a different culture and yet respect and honor the ancestry if it may not biologically be ours in this life?
Yeah, I think the last piece of what you just said was in this life. And I think that's a really key point, right? I don't, and no shame to anyone else. I'm not of the school of thought that anything belongs to us or that anyone can truly be a steward of any teaching of or any ancestral practice unless we are like in this, unless we're always meeting what we're sharing with a sense of curiosity and a sense of knowing that we're a vessel, right? We're not the keepers of knowledge. We're not also the givers of knowledge. We're truly a vessel. And I don't also believe that even just like, I love being, I'm so honored to be seen as someone who is kind of leading the vetting process, but the truth is it's not me. It's Hira. Hira has its own entity, its own energy. And I stand on, ancestral giants who are guiding and leading this. I am just the vessel, right? I've shared this with you, I believe, as well. We go through a vetting process, and then Hira ultimately decides who's on Hira and not. There's practitioners who have joined Hira and then have been removed through Hira. Like they, for whatever reason, can't get into the platform, they can't set up their profile, their payment doesn't go through, right? Or, other things will happen and they find themselves no longer on the platform. And so I I have to really, I'm very humble in that, like, it's bigger than me. It's not me. It's not you. It's none of us individually or collectively. It's so much bigger than us. And so in that, and reflecting on that piece, when we talk about sharing ancestral practices and sharing practices, we truly don't really know where things come from. But what we do know is that we always want to remain curious, that we always want to remain honoring what we do know, right? So yoga, for example, I got my yoga teacher training, and for as long as I've known, yoga is rooted in practices in India. But as I've evolved and I've grown and I've learned, and especially with my work with the decolonization of wellness practices, I did my master's in that actually. As well as my work in equity work and in dismantling of anti-Black racism, yoga doesn't come just from India. Yoga is actually rooted and called something different in so many different other cultures, right? We've got a form of meditation and prayer in so many different other cultures and roots and ancestral practices. There's forms of yoga that come out of Africa, right? And there's also work and there's a lot of work and research done that we're all originally from Africa. All of our roots are originally from Africa. So, with that in mind, are we all not from the same source? And if we do believe that, and we do believe in the oneness of all of us, then how do we shame, blame, and dismiss individuals who are attracted to something? But what we can do and what differentiates someone who honors roots and who doesn't is the essence of, are you seeing yourself as a godly being who is the giver of knowledge, or are you seeing yourselves as a vessel and meet everything with curiosity and understand, well, how far back can I go? Who am I honoring in this? What roots and what cultures am I honoring? And sometimes honoring roots is actually scientific. Like when we look at hypnosis and hypnotherapy, there isn't really a lot of data around like where that truly comes from, except from very recently with scientific knowledge and research that's done. And so when we talk about honoring roots, then it's also where the efficacy of honoring the root of humanity, the efficacy of honoring the root of the individual experience. So it's not predatory, and we're not, we're not engaging in hurting vulnerable individuals. So I think that there's, in the colonial sense, there's a right and there's a wrong, and there's you're ashamed or you're in or you're out. But when we're decolonizing leadership and when we're taking on this approach of understanding and honoring roots, there is duality. There is so many different ways in how we love and support each other. And so the question is, how do you practice with love? And what does that look like for you?
That is a big question. One of one of the value, or I guess two of the values that I think you mentioned, or I've seen that Hira has, is remembering and restoration. And to me, these are essentially the pillars of decolonizing everything from education to wellness. Can you speak to us about that aspect and why it's such an inseparable part of Hira?
Yeah, that's a huge question. And the first thing that came to me was bell hooks. And I need to unpack that a little bit for myself as as I respond to this. And um I think the remembrance is It's so big. Remembrance of who we are, of why we're here, the humility of um we're so important and we're so sacred and reverent, but we're also not above or below anything or anyone. And there's this again the duality of the remembrance, right? Of like, yes, you're a sacred being, and no, you are not entitled or above or below anything, right? And so I think that when we're in this remembrance and in this restoration, it's also it's hand in hand with the dismantling of the belief that we are separate, a belief that we there is a hierarchy in existence, and moving away from this triangle of belief of what's in order, and more into this idea that we're actually in a circle, the sacred circle that indigeneity, Canadian Indigenous teaches us, and so many Indigenous cultures around the world. We meet in circle, we form in circle, and so we're all sacred beings, and yet there's a oneness of who and what we are together, right? And so yes, restoration and remembrance is so, so important within the Hira collective. One of the things that we continue to infuse, actually, we have quarterly retreats specifically just for our practitioners on the platform. And at these quarterly retreats, we infuse these four values, two of which being the remembrance and the restoration, around, when we're looking at abundance or money or how, the sacred rest. And it's the remembrance of like, well, what do I actually need? What are the different versions of me that have needed that? And how do we restore ourselves back to those waves of being, believing, and internalizing um, in the modern world, right? We also need to merge that we are in a different world. The work life looks different, at least here in North America, right? And so this again back to this like duality. I know that like those of your listeners who are looking for like a definite answer, unfortunately, I'm not going to give that to you. I think that there's everything and oneness, and I think that there's people who believe like very finitely one piece, and they're right, and so are other people. Like, no one's wrong, right? And I'm trying to present a view of like, can we embrace all of it and just kind of see life and this experience of life, the spirit, we're having a human experience, right? In a spiritual sense, right? Can we embrace this as just what it is, and can we meet it for what it is, versus like this chase to only, like, even this idea of like we only have one life. Well, do we? Do we know that for sure? And so when we're talking about restoration and remembrance, it's also restoring, our own humanity and our belief that we are enough. And I think sometimes it just starts there, and that I'm not alone. There is a collective being and there is a oneness. And we've lost that sense in our world. We're fighting and we're divisive and we're arguing, and, my belief versus your belief. When can we just kind of come to an understanding that we're all human and we all want to be loved? We all want to be, a sense of belonging, and we all want to be cared for. And I think that's where the foundational pieces of restoration and remembrance are.
Yeah, because it is a both and world. And
Yeah.
I mean, the reason and thank you for sharing this perspective of yours, because I think commonly a lot of us have inherited this notion that uh, wisdom, spiritual guidance, life guidance is told to me. It's from the outside in. There is authority and power outside of us. And when this is I've been lucky enough to meet some of the practitioners who are part of Hira, as well as talking to yourself. And even in, casual conversations with them, it is so apparent that they hold the container within the self that allows these pathways that you just discussed to they've done this work internally, and so when they show up in the world and they offer healing services or reflective services or therapeutic services, they are actually able to hold that for another. And so the there's a range of practitioners on the Hira Collective platform, But to me, the one thing they have in common is that they are able to hold the space for self-remembering, remembering our own power, our own authority, or your own, in a way that is right for you, is the medicine you need in the time of your session. And to have not just one person here or there that does that, but this entire, you know, smorgasbord of awesome practitioners. I absolutely love that, and it is truly like medicine of the world. So thank you for explaining it that way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
I just to your point about like remembering who you are, and like it's also about meeting people where they're at, right? And again, there's again not from a place of hierarchy, but just this is where you are. And also I think often in the wellness industry, like you said it so beautifully about, you know, the power is outside, and it's like I'm looking to that knowledge and I'm looking for that. And that's actually what keeps people in a cycle of seeing perhaps the same healer or the same thing, because it's like I can't continue or exist without your help.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying about even like when we're vetting practitioners onto the platform, it's yes and cultural roots and all that, but it's that humility piece of um you know, we're on, I'm on the journey with you. Like we're on this together. Like I don't know any more than you. I'm just shining a light. I'm just showing a mirror, right? And I think that's the difference. And I think when you ask the question about restoration, that's the edge, right? It's restoring in not seeing ourselves or individually as powerless, but actually as oneness, is and how we all are sovereign beings, and yet we're also yes and right you and the powers in the collective, right?
And I think the beautiful thing here is we all know, we have a feeling inside. It's uh, for good or for bad. I actually think it's a good thing. There's no checklist of authenticity, right?
Right. Right,
Like,
exactly.
right. So when you are in the presence of a person, whether it's your barista, in the morning, or your coworker, or a healer, you know, you may not want to listen, but when you're in the presence of someone who is as authentic as they can be today, without falling into the pattern of entitlement or bad behavior, or like different things like that, which actually loops into my next question. Now, community work on the best of days is not easy, right? And one of the reasons I think it isn't easy is, as you said, a lot of the current program of humanity is separation and division, and we are still learning to sit in the complexity of division and all of the 110 different ways we divide each other. We divide each other, like gender, sex, opinions, thoughts, ideologies, skin color, eye color, like all of this stuff. So when you have community, you have divergent people coming in. And while the idea is nice and the felt sense is nice, a lot of people, and I've noticed this in the city as well, there's a bit of a push-pull. People want to feel belonging. People want to feel held and cared for. They're seeking community. And yet, the ways in which we show up, the ways in which others show up, making spaces where maybe you feel unsafe, someone else feels unsafe, there is a lot of push-pull here. So I know what you're creating is the tech platform around this, but I'm so interested, both personally and professionally, where do you draw from? Where do you root in? And sort of how do you ensure, as the person, Reema Rachel, who is doing not just the Hero Collective, but yourself and family, yourself inside your house, yourself outside your house, how do you reconcile your inside and outside when it comes to you showing up in community?
Yeah, that's a really great
Or
question.
it's a very long question.
No, it's a really, really important question, I think, too, is so, one that I've actually been having quite a lot lately, especially in Leo season, right?
Guide.
Um, and I think that, the generation that I am grew up believing that leaders needed to show up a certain way. So, your hair is tidy, your clothes are tidy, your behavior is tidy. And nothing affects you, right? You're clear, you're clean, and you're professional. And I disrupt that. I want to disrupt that. And so, I've showed up to team meetings, upset about something that's happened. I've broke down in tears during our team meetings. I've vulnerably shared with the collective of practitioners. A time once that I was throwing up out of stress, like I was just throwing up. And not to say that like this, I'm like, um,
Dumping on them. Yeah.
dumping on
Yeah.
them, but to say that there's all the celebrations and all the things I share and all the versions of me. And of course, there's also limitations, not because I don't want to show up authentically, but because, my Angela talks about, but there's a part of you that you just keep to yourself as well. That sacred part of you that you don't, it's not a lack of inauthenticity. It's not even a place of safety of whether or not I feel safe, but there's a piece of you that you just need to keep to you sometimes too, at least for me. And so how do I reconcile the two sides? I don't anymore. I think there's, versions of me that are, I talk very silly and I joke around a lot with my mom and my dad, like a lot. And I put on a voice for my dog because I can't talk to him in a normal voice for some reason. And those of you who are dog owners, um, he's my baby, right? But those are all me. All those versions are of me. And if anyone was to see those sides of me in any other environment or space, they would still recognize me in those spaces. I'm not a different person. And so when we're building community, I think it is also providing, not providing, but like when we're able to show up that way, we're giving others permission too, especially because so many of us have internalized the belief of perfectionism, or I internalize the belief of what a leader looks like and how a leader behaves. I don't know if I see myself as a leader more than I see myself as a visionary and someone who holds collective space. Um, I I'm leading myself. That's what I'm doing. And in that, perhaps it's inspiring others too. At least I hope it is. And maybe it's pissing some people off. I don't know. But I know that I'm leading me. And I know that the little girl, the little version of me that was 3, 5, 6, 12, is really goddamn proud of the version I am today. And that's what I get to put my head on my pillow and be proud about too, right? That, and am I making an impact for the better, not from a savioristic, not from this ideologistic praise that I'm God, but can I leave this earth, knowing that I tried and made, some people smile and made some people feel like they belong. Um, so yeah, I think, when we talk about leadership, we really need to disrupt and really need to dismantle the ideology of what is leadership. And does it mean that we're making sure people are following us? Because that's wrong. Or are we ensuring that we're able to follow ourselves and be authentic to the purpose, the vision, the belief, the call, the nudge that we're getting, and hoping that that also inspires other to follow their nudge and their call and their belief and their support. Um, we really do need to relook at what leadership means. Is it power, control, fear mongering, or is it calm and soft and love and supportive and foundational? It doesn't need to be loud and up here. It could just be warm and calm like a blanket, right?
I love that. And, I really appreciate how you expressed that you aren't false perfect when you show up to meetings, um, and, hold yourself professionally. But I think the big thing with that is there is still a sense of self accountability and self responsibility. And
Yes,
when that is absent, it appears that you're just coming and dumping your life onto
yes,
whoever is unfortunate enough to be on a call with you. But that
exactly.
isn't what you're saying, right?
No,
Because there are cycles and rhythms and phases to each and every one of us. And yes, sometimes work needs to get done, but there's also, I think this is what I love, there's that big inner trust, inner faith that yes, the work absolutely will get done. And it is important in the context of lives that are lived rather than, and I think this, the power and control side of things, this uh, chase towards perfectionism comes because we're trying so hard to maintain these ideologies that we've inherited. We're actually just trying to prop up these ideologies and then internalize them. And so we are able to, and I think this is what you're saying, we are able to show up authentically and simply express, you know what, I'm so angry. I had a weird dream and a bad day, and actually have it be neutral. And also have emotions, bring that up, but not make it someone else's problem.
Yes.
That is a big, big thing,
Huge.
right?
The word self-accountability and oh my God, now it's leaving me. You said both of them. Self-accountability and self-reflection is so important.
It's a
What
form of self-love to me. Like
it is.
if I am not accountable to my own self, it means
Yeah.
there's something I don't have my structure, my containment. I can't
No.
love myself without a sense of
Yeah.
containment in this body. Like I need that, and then I can expand
Amen.
outwards, right?
And
Like,
I think, and I also want to, I think the question that we need to also ask is what's the point, right? Like when you're sharing something with somebody, what is it that you need? And we're not mind readers, right? And so, right? Not yet, anyways, right? And so, what do you need? So, if I'm sharing something, like, when I shared, I remember this so clearly. I was like, oh, without giving any too many details, I was throwing up. And I was like, I sat down and I was like, oh man, like, I'm feeling really lonely. I need prayers. I think that this is what I need. I jumped on the group chat. I said, hey, practitioners, I don't want to share this with you. I don't want anyone to worry, but I'm throwing up out of stress. I'm just wondering if people can send blessings and good wishes my way. Here's what happened. Here's what I need, right? Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I need. Sometimes it's, I'm just crying and I just need you to be there. Can you just do that for me? We're not mind readers, right? Many of us are quick to jump into, how do you want me to fix this? What do you need, right? And sometimes it's just like, can you just like be of witness if you have capacity, right? And I think too, in our team meetings, I think that the two times that I've shown up crying, one of the first time I did, um, I didn't come to the meeting crying. I cried in the middle of the meeting. One of my team members, and I'll never forget this, said to me, it's so nice to be able to hold space for you because you're always holding space for us. And sometimes, too, we also have to realize, as those who are seen as visionaries and leaders, people sometimes also prop us up on these like really like invisible pedestals, and we're not perfect. And giving others the opportunity to see you be a human and perhaps hold space for you is a gift in itself, because it also humanizes your relationship. It also neutralizes your relationship with them. Now, we're also talking about the other extreme of that, which is when we're asking too much from people, when we're burdening people with their issues. And when that's the case, we really need to reflect on why. Why do I feel the need to? And I would assume that the gap there is the lack of relationship with yourself. And so there's no shame. I don't want to shame anyone for doing that, because I know we've all been there when we're so out of our own bodies and we're so disconnected from ourselves, because we've been taught to outsource our power. Every healer, every doctor, everyone that we've been to has taught us that we're unworthy, incapable of taking care of ourselves. So, so we'll dump over here. So now the gap is, how do I build that relationship with myself? How do I learn to trust myself? How do I make commitments and follow through? And asking ourselves those questions, and practicing ways like journaling or self-talk or whatever that might be, to start to develop that relationship with yourself so that you are able to reflect and have self accountability when you are in those situations where you do want to be in community and have a sense of belonging, and both not just have space held for you, but also be able to hold space for others.
yeah, I see a lot of that as the dance between structure or discipline and chaos. And like oftentimes
Mm.
chaos is the creative life force, right? It's the prana, the shakti in all of us. And there are some people who are deeply connected to their emotionality. They feel everything. And it's this thing that perhaps what those types of people need to develop is the accountability, the structure where they can hold all of everything they're going through and not have it like pour out of everywhere. On the flip side, someone who comes from a lot of structure, rigidity, discipline, they might have, their work might be to soften and let go and feel all their feelings without needing to story them, create, make them into a problem or just deny that any of these exist. And this is the beauty about like being able to hold, and this is what I was looking through some of the practitioners on Hira's database, and this is this is the sense I got. And I should clarify, I am not a practitioner on Hira, and Hira is not paying me anything to do this.
Oh,
But
okay.
I, just to clarify, Reema is here, she can tell you. But in speaking to her and in getting to know some of the practitioners on this platform, I was honestly so thrilled and delighted and moved. That's why I'm so happy you're here doing this interview with me. But the sense I got when I was looking at all these practitioners is that a range, a really broad spectrum of emotional and mental realities are served by this group of, what is it? You have 30 practitioners
Yeah,
and growing.
250 applied, right?
Oh yeah, yes. Yeah. So there are a lot of people who are just who do this style of work, and like 1,000 other things that we've discussed briefly here today, and are able to actually hold the space and honor it. And Reema, you've created the user interface and the web platform, and mobile platform to do that. So that is, again, amazing. I think we're past time here, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Reema, do you have any, so just to loop this back in, our theme today, and our theme for Leo season, I should say, is reclaiming lost or hidden aspects of ourselves and rooting in to into the source of our nourishment, into our source, into the pillar that makes us authentically who we are, so that when we show up in community, our energies are able to be open because they are already nourished, right? So a lot of us experience wounds of belonging where there's a lack inside of connection. And sometimes when we show up from that place, we show up in the wound. And then we get life experiences that make us feel even more lonely. And it's so icky. And so this work of being able to show up in community truly, authentically, responsibly, joyfully, in the joy of our ebbs and flows, this is a really, really beautiful thing. And I'm so glad you were able to join us today.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I'm going to put the link to Hira if you are seeking practitioners that are vetted through Hira's really, really intense hands-on vetting process, who have done the work of going questioning ethics and ancestry, and have come to a place where they can articulate integrity and hold that type of space. Please find your practitioners on Hira. Reema, any parting words in this season for
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. Just one thing that's coming through is the work of self, or not the work, but the journey of self and the journey of self-love and the journey of self-discovery is not work. And while we're nourishing ourselves, while we're caring for ourselves, so that, we know we are falling in love with ourselves, don't make that feel like or be work. Enjoy that. Find joy in that. Find peace in that. Find nourishment in that. And when that does feel like work, step back, because are you meeting yourself out of punishment? Are you meeting yourself out of I need to be better? Or are you meeting yourself with I love myself, I want to get to know myself a little better? And really, like, in the world of wellness and in the industry and all the journeying and all the things that we're doing, I think oftentimes we trap ourselves in this cycle of beating ourselves up to work on ourselves, when really we need to meet ourselves with grace and gentleness and compassion. Especially in this Leo season, that's how we're transforming, with leading, with influence, with leadership, with self, and reclamation of self really needs to be as we're restoring, right?
I love that. We need a different word that's not work. I actually call
Yeah.
it in my own self-narrative, I call it cultivation. Like
I love
think
that.
that's like, it could be work to cultivate, like dig the soil.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that so much.
Thank you so much, Reema, for joining me today. Thanks, guys. Please comment, be part of the Hira Collective. I think you guys have a newsletter, and enjoy this beautiful, sunny Leo season. And if you are someone who's struggling to find your roots, they are right beneath your feet. Have
I
a
love
gorgeous day.